Morning. Great to see all of you. Happy New Year. It's great to see all of you. It's great to see such a crowd in here. It's wonderful. I want to try to describe a an experience that I know all of us have had, but you may not know how to name. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples to kind of help you understand what I'm talking about. The first example is about a year ago. I was reading a book, spiritual book, and I discovered the word mandorla in the book. Have you heard the word mandorla before? Some of you, I'm seeing a few nods. Mandorla is the shape that is created when two circles overlap. Mandorla also, by the way, is the Italian word for almond. Almond. So now you know how to speak Italian. Now, so what? In a lot of religious art, mandorlas are used to represent the overlap of two realities. So, like with Jesus, his humanity and his divinity, or sometimes the overlap of heaven and earth. So, mandorlas are used a lot in religious art. Interestingly, in ancient religious art, including non-Christian sources, and you'll see it in lots of religious art around the world. Now, prior to reading the word mandorla and its explanation in this book, I had never heard of a mandorla before. Have anybody never heard of it, right? And I had seen mandorlas thousands of times because I've looked at a lot of religious artwork. I had never noticed a mandorla before. That shape just I was oblivious to it. But once that I had learned it and saw it and knew what it was, guess what? I saw it everywhere. And not just in religious artwork. It's in windows, it's in architecture, it's in tile on floors, it's in textiles and people's clothes. I see mandorlas everywhere I look now. They're everywhere, right? Did they just all of a sudden appear in the world when I read this last year? Of course not. They were ancient. I've become aware, and now I see something that I've looked at over and over and over, but I had never seen it before. Here's another example. When my daughter was in high school, we bought her a used emerald green Honda Element. Now, I had seen Honda Elements. I owned a Honda Element. Before we bought hers, I had never seen an emerald green one before. Now, my daughter, we don't own it anymore. We've since sold it and moved on. But my daughter, when she had it, named it Elphaba. Some of you know Elphaba, the Green Witch, and the Wizard of Oz and Wicked, right? So Elphaba. Now, I'd never noticed that when we found it on the lot, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this color. Guess what happened after we bought it? They're everywhere, right? They're everywhere. And so in my family, even though we don't own one anymore, we still see them on the road. And with those, there goes Elphaba, right? There goes Elphaba. We see it all the time. You understand the reality that I'm talking about? That all of a sudden something happens, a conversation, you hear something happens in your life, and what before you were blind to, all of a sudden just seems to keep coming up. You see it over and over and over. Some people call this a frequency illusion, or you might Google this later, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. I'm not going to explain to you what Baader-Meinhof is, but you can Google it and find out. But what happens, it was there all along, but all of a sudden, because now we see it and we're seeing it over and over, sometimes it can imply that there's some deep spiritual meaning here. Oh, like somebody's trying to get my attention. Oh, like now I'm starting to see something. This must have particular meaning. By the way, this happens all the time. When I'm standing out there kind of after the service and we're talking, I can't tell you how often somebody comes up to me like, that sermon. Like, we were talking about that in the car on the way to church. We were just talking about that in the office on Friday. I just heard that on the radio. That was in my morning devotion. And it sort of can give the impression like, whoa, what's going on? Like God is trying to reveal something. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe in signs. I do believe that sometimes there aren't coincidences, that God is trying to get our attention. But probably oftentimes the more likely explanation of why I start to see something recurringly, hear something recurringly, is simply that what I was previously blind to, it's caught my attention now, right? That I've become aware, and that new awareness sort of makes me more sensitive and more open to seeing it. Let me just say it this way. we're most likely to see what we're already aware of. And we're most likely to see what we're already seeking. Awareness, openness, leads us to seeing what's right in front of us. Spiritually speaking, the monk Thomas Merton said, "We have what we seek. It is there all the time, and if we give it time, it will make itself known to us." If we give it time, it will make itself known to us. So today, as you've already heard, is a special day in the life of the church. We call it Epiphany. And today's the day that we tell the story of the three wise men who saw a star far from Jerusalem, far from Bethlehem, and it led them on a journey that took them to the baby Jesus. You may not have realized this because we kind of compressed the story. The wise men weren't there on Christmas night. They came later, many months later, maybe years later. They followed the star from a very distant place to follow the star because they believed there was something there to be seen. Now we call today Epiphany. Epiphany. What does the word epiphany mean? Epiphany means revealed. It means a discovery, an awakening, an aha moment. So you might use the word in other ways. Like you learn something, whoa, I hadn't realized that before. That's an epiphany, right? So we use the word epiphany because in this moment, the star shined in the sky that had never been seen before. The wise men, or sometimes we call them the three kings, or sometimes we call them the magi, they saw the star and they believed it revealed something. That something important, something historical was happening. They saw it and they said, we got to follow this. Now, we don't know a lot about these wise men. The Bible doesn't tell us much. They lived in the East. That's all we know. Most people think they probably lived somewhere like Iran or Iraq. They weren't Jews. They weren't ethnically Jewish. They weren't religiously Jewish. They were Gentiles, as the Bible would say. We sometimes call them magi, and that implies that not only were they royalty and not only were they foreigners, but that they were people who looked to the stars. Magi were astrologers, not astronomers, astrologers. That they looked and studied the stars in the sky and believed that there was meaning and patterns. And so they watched every night out looking at the sky, and then all of a sudden one night there was a star they had never seen before. They believed that star represented something that was worth following. They went on a many-month journey because of a star. A star that in their mind pointed to something historic. We don't want to miss out on this. We want to see what this star represents. And so they follow it. It leads them to, they believe it's the birth of a king. So that leads them to the palace. Like, where would you go if you wanted to go see a baby king? Right? You go to the palace. So they go to Jerusalem, they go to King Herod, and they ask him, where is the newborn king of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east, and we've come to honor him. Now, King Herod didn't know about a baby king, right? He didn't know anything about it. So he pulls together all the experts in Jerusalem and say, what might they be talking about? This is verses 3 through 5. When King Herod heard this, he was troubled. Everyone in Jerusalem was troubled with him. He gathered all the chief priests and the legal experts and asked them where the Christ was to be born. And they said, in Bethlehem of Judea. Notice the one word there. He was what? He was troubled. Now think about that for a minute. A baby, a king. A king has all the power. A king has a military. A king can do pretty much whatever a king wants to do, right? And the baby. He gets the message there's a baby and he's troubled by it. Why? Well, because King Herod, we know historically, was not a legitimate king. He was the king of the Jews, but he wasn't even a Jew. He had been put in place by the conquering Romans. And so he was really a puppet of Rome. People didn't like him. They didn't respect him. His rule, he knew he was holding on, right, by a thread. Caesar could get rid of him. The people could rebel. He was an insecure king. And so here come this royalty, this entourage from a foreign nation saying a new king has been born. He's threatened by it. He's intimidated by it. Isn't that amazing? A king might be insecure. You think rulers of the world might have insecurities? if you're curious. If you're curious about that kind of thing, Now I just contrast for a moment these wise men from another country and King Herod and the priests. These wise men from a very distant place saw a star and said, we should follow that. Where was the star shining? Right above King Herod and the priests. And they hadn't even noticed it. They hadn't even noticed it. And what did they see when they saw the star? The wise men who saw it from a long way off said, that's important. That's meaningful. We should follow that star. We should see what it represents. We think that this is an historic moment. What did King Herod see? Danger, a threat. We should do away with this. Right? And then what happened in the end? The wise men, when they find out, oh, that's over Bethlehem, they keep following it. What does King Herod do? He doesn't follow it. What do the priests do? They don't follow it. Right? If anything, they begin plotting how to do away with this. For the kings, for the Magi, it was a sign of hope. For King Herod, for the priests, it was danger, leading to acts of violence. Same star revealed to both, but seen in very different ways. You also heard a moment ago a reading from Isaiah. That was hundreds of years before the star ever appeared. We read this also on Epiphany because historically it's been read as a prophecy of what happened there. It said, arise, shine, your light has come. The Lord's glory has shone upon you. Though darkness covers the earth and gloom the nations, the lights will shine upon you. God's glory will appear over you. Nations will come to your light, kings to your dawning radiance. Lift up your eyes and look all around. They are all gathered. They've come to you. I just want to focus a little bit on verse 4. Lift up your eyes and look around. The kings, the Magi, had their eyes wide open, and they saw a star. The star was shining right above the heads of King Herod and the priests, but their eyes must have been closed. The message of Scripture is, hey, folks, open your eyes. There are epiphanies to be seen. Open your eyes. Pay attention. Get your head out of the stand. Wake up. I want to show you things. Pay attention. I don't know if any of you experienced this reality. When I was growing up, we went on long family road trips. I'm an only child. We didn't fly in my family. My dad hated interstates, so we always drove back roads. My dad also wouldn't drive above the speed limit. And so we would go on these long family trips. My dad was also that guy that when you came to a scenic view, you pull over, a scenic, guess what he did? Pulled over for the scenic view. Well, I had to get out of the car. Dad had to get the binoculars. I don't even know what he was looking at, right? All the historic markers, guess what our family did? Everyone pull over, read it, right? So I'm in the back seat on these long family road trips, right? I'm trying to sleep. I got nobody to play with, nobody to talk to. I'm reading comic books. I'm playing. And then every once in a while, Dad, as we pull, I don't even know what it was, but every once in a while, this happened recurringly. He'd say, hey, wake up, get up, you're missing it. You're missing it. I'm missing what? Right? This is a joke in my family. Dad's gone, but we still say this in the family. You're missing it. Just in his honor, right? Anybody have these family trips you grew up with? Yeah, okay. So I just want to ask this morning, is it possible that we're missing it? Is it possible that there are still epiphanies? Is it possible that God is moving in the world around us still? That there are still stars shining? We miss it because we're so busy. Because we have our heads buried in what we're doing, the daily tasks of life, our worries, our distractions. We're also busy. Is it possible that there are epiphanies all around us all the time? Opportunities to see God moving in the world. Mandoras, where there's an overlap of heaven and earth. Is it possible that we're not paying attention? I want to just close with this. There's a great line from a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She says, Earth's crammed with heaven, every common bush of fire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pick blackberries. That's a reference to Moses and the burning bush, right? How often in life do we recognize, whoa, this is a holy moment. God is here. And how many of us spend our life just picking blackberries, feeding our faces, right? Earth is full of the presence of God. The Magi looked up and they saw a star that was life-changing, history-changing, the birth of the Savior, and everybody else just missed it. There was a star shining above us right now. Would we see it? Or would we miss it? Are we paying attention? I hope we're people that pay attention. I want to be a person that pays attention. Oh Lord, open our eyes. Give us spiritual eyes to see. Open our ears to hear things that we might miss. Lord, help us not to be so distracted, to give more attention to you and what you're doing among us. Lord, we thank you for stars